So guys, welcome. My name is Anshul. I'm the founder of Camp K12. I have probably met many of you before. Those of you who are new to the Camp K12 family joining us for this event for the first time, Camp K12 is an online school for 21st century skills that schools don't teach. So skills like coding and many more skills coming up soon. We like to bring them to you from the comfort of home and the convenience of home through interactive online courses. And students and parents who are here with us today who may not know about Camp K12, it was started by me about 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was a student, also a coder, much like yourselves, and I was studying computer science at MIT. And during one of my years at MIT, I had this idea of building a curriculum to teach coding, mathematics, science, and all the topics you learn in school through really fun gamified curriculum. And so I came to India and I started teaching coding workshops at schools like DPS Arkipuram in Delhi, and then spread to hundreds of schools across India. Coincidentally, guys, our speaker today, Tanay, is one of the students from my first batches that I taught 10 years ago. And that's a very special story. He's a Camp K12 alumnus, and that's why I'm giving you a bit of this history. I've also prepared some slides because I wanted this to be visual for you. I wanted you to see 10 years ago, what did the schools look like where we were teaching coding, and what did it look like in the computer lab where we were teaching kids to build games like the games you build as a part of Camp K12's curriculum. 10 years ago, no schools were doing this. No students were doing this. And I wanted to show you what that looks like. So I've created some slides and I'll start sharing those soon. This is going to be about a 1-hour session, out of which we'll spend 45 minutes on the fireside chat format, where I will be asking Tanay questions that you have submitted via the Google form that you saw, as well as some questions that I'm curious to ask him. And after that, guys, we have a few special announcements for you. So we'll try to squeeze all of that in this 1-hour time period. To ask questions to Tanay, who is our speaker today, you can download the Camp K12 mobile app. It's right here. You can go on Play Store or App Store and search Camp K12. The app has a live event feature. Today, that live event is Camp K12 Talks episode 5, featuring our guest, Tanay, and you can submit your questions to him. The top 5 questions, well, one, I'll ask them. I will be asking them to Tanay, and you'll get to hear the answers, but we will also be giving you a free scholarship to a very special program that we're running, which I'll talk about at the end of this session with Tanay. So before I bring Tanay up and ask him to take the stage, as I promised, I want to show you 10 years ago, when I first met Tanay, what the scene really looked like. So let me just show you this. Tanay, I don't know if you remember this picture at the top left. Does it remind you of anything?
This is one of the computer labs back in DPS.
Yes, this is the school that Tanay was studying at, right? You were at DPS Arkipuram.
Yep, I was at DPS Arkipuram 10 years ago.
I think this photo was taken the same week where I met you. This was the workshop, the very first coding workshop of Camp K12 at DPS back in 2010. Then there are a few other Delhi schools that are shown here. And this is me in my college days. This is me in my college days. We at Camp K12 started teaching coding to young students long time ago. And you see Google here, right? We used to take students in Bangalore and in Gurgaon and Delhi to the Google office in Gurgaon and Bangalore back then as a field trip. Now, during COVID, it's a lot harder to take you guys to Google, so we bring Google to you. That's basically how this works. Here are more students. Tanay, I don't think any of these are DPS Arkipuram, but there are many other DPS schools represented here. This one, I think, is a DPS school. This one's a DPS school. This one's a DPS school. Lots of DPS schools. I think this one's also a DPS school. So, your school and the other DPS schools were the first few schools that Camp K12 used to teach coding at. And then we started teaching to hundreds of other schools across the nation. And then we started teaching online. So guys, that's the rich history of Camp K12 for those of you who don't know. Today, we have brought someone here who is a product manager at Google currently. He was Camp K12's alumnus and student 10 years ago in the very first batch that I taught at DPS Arkipuram. He went on to study at St. Stephen's, but realized that he wanted something different for himself, and he's going to talk about that today. Dropped out, went to Brown University, which is an Ivy League college in the US, and studied computer science there. He's been admitted to Harvard for his MBA, And currently he's at Google working on products, as you can see from his background screen, Tanay's background screen, COVID exposure notifications is the name of the team that he's working on. And he's going to talk about how coding and technology enabled him to, well, how it changed his life and how it led to what he does today. So with that context, guys, please welcome Tanay, our speaker for today, with a round of applause. Please welcome our speaker. Hey, Tanay, we'll have to ask you to unmute yourself as well, and then we'll let you take over. Hey, Tanay, why don't you just say hello to our audience?
Hey, everyone. And thanks so much for having me on a Sunday morning. So excited to speak with everyone.
No problem. And Tanay, you're visiting India, right? You are based out of where? Can you just give people a sense of where you live these days?
Yeah, so I'm based in California. So as you can see, the screen behind me is about the California COVID app that we've launched. And I work at Google headquarters. Right now, obviously, that's shut down because of COVID. So I haven't actually been to the office in 9 months, but that's where I'm based. And I'm here for a few weeks to visit my family in India. And when Anshul said it'd be great to speak with all of you, I jumped at the chance and excited to see all these people enthusiastic about coding and developing.
Thanks so much, Tanay, and a very proud moment for Camp K12 as well, having one of its alumni come back to meet young Camp K12, as we call them, campers. So campers, you're in good company with a former camper. This is you 10 years out, right? This Tanay 10 years ago was sitting in your shoes as a student learning coding. So very, very special moment for us as well, and welcome, Tanay. Guys, I took the questions you submitted via Google Forms. I added some of my own questions, and we're going to go back and forth between me and Tanay. You can keep asking questions via the mobile app. I will be looking at them. So let me see if you guys have asked questions right now. One moment. So you guys have started submitting questions already. Lovely. So I'll keep taking questions from the mobile app as we go along. So I want to start out by asking Tanay about his coder journey and how it started during his school day. Because our audience today, we have some parents here, but we have a lot of students here who are in school right now. So Tanay, take us back to how you first discovered coding as a hobby or as a skill.
Yeah. So when I was 6 or 7 years old, just like everyone else, I just really liked playing games on the computer and messing around and installing every CD I could find, regardless of what software it was or what app it was, and so on. And at some point, I started wondering, all the settings I have to change to make this work and all the buttons I have to click, like, why do they exist? And, all that sort of thing. And so I kind of almost went backwards into, step by step, how are all these things made and why are they the way they are? And so I decided to start, teaching myself as much of that as I could. So I started with HTML. So when I was, 11 or 12 years old, the internet was, 2005, 6. The internet was a very big and upcoming, exciting thing. It was very new in many ways, especially in India. So I tried to teach myself HTML and started making kind of websites and little applications and all of that. Then I'd animate them using, software back then called Flash. They could make little animations and games and so on, and use Photoshop to make them a bit shiny and all these kind of tools that we almost take for granted nowadays to make fancy graphics. So I started messing around, and then I moved to JavaScript, where you can make more kind of dynamic tools and applications and things like that. So basically just messed around. I'd look at tutorials online, just kind of, copy them or try and reverse engineer them and things like that. So never with a purpose.
What grade were you in, Tanay, when you started working?
So I started doing this in 5th grade.
Wow.
So I just kind of sit down, again, with no purpose, just sit down, find a tutorial that looked interesting, whether it's a bouncing ball or, little tic-tac-toe game or whatever, and just kind of mess around. And then, at home, my parents would come back in the evening and then I had to study. But this is just how I spent the afternoons. And it was great fun.
So starting in grade 5, you were a lot younger than I was when I started coding. But our students at Camp K12 today are even younger than you. Back then there was no way to have mentors in coding the way there is today. The school system formally didn't teach coding in the way that these kids learn it at Camp K12. So you discovered it yourself, and I also, in my early days, discovered it through a book in the library, started building websites, and then moved to Java games and then do web apps with JavaScript and things like that. So it seems like your story mimics that, but many years shifted younger in grade 5. So talk about your time at DPS, because I know you were part of you did a lot of coding during your school days and high school especially. So talk a bit about those days. What did you used to build during those days? How did you spend time? There was a club that you were part of, a very popular club at DPS Arkipuram, where young kids like you got together to code. So talk about those days and how you practiced coding and what kinds of things you created at that time.
Yeah. So, like you mentioned, we had the computer club, and that was basically for, enthusiasts. And so there was a screening process and so on. And even the screening process, which is one of these little projects that we were messing around on, we made kind of an animated intro video for the club for their next competition. And that's how a couple of us, me and a friend of mine got in. And a lot of the coding then was not long-term projects, but kind of in 2 or 3 hours, can you build a website, or can you build a game or a project or something like that with HTML, with JavaScript, or, in C++ or things like that. And so I think the skill I developed was being able to do things really quickly and just getting to the habit of going from 0 lines of code to kind of, 100 lines of code that did some basic things very, very quickly, and getting to that habit because, every week or every couple of weeks, I'd be in that environment where in a few hours you had to produce something that would be judged, that would meet certain requirements and so on. And the other thing that we learned was when the computer club, all of us messed around. Some of us would do web development, some of us did graphic design, some did video editing, some did, gaming specialists, and all that kind of thing. So we also just learned a lot about all these things that you need to build software that aren't necessarily coding, like Photoshop, kind of how, the internet works, how browsers work, how well your code runs on different browsers, all that kind of thing. So a lot of it was just, exploring the computer we had in front of us, clicking through the settings, seeing how code would run differently in different, with different settings and so on. And just, being creative enough to kind of see what would come out of that. I think having that community and those mentors, like you mentioned, was great.
Also during the time that you took, you discovered Camp K12 and were part of that first Camp K12 inaugural batch. So do you remember anything about what you learned in that first Camp K12 class? Would you have any memories to share with the students here?
Yeah, so I remember I signed up because a few of my other friends from the computer club were signing up, and they said it's a game development class, and obviously all of us like playing games. So it seemed like a no-brainer. During this summer, we said we'll all do this together, see what we can make and all that kind of thing. And so we did that. I think it was a few weeks, and I think it was a great experience. It was the first time where all your school projects are about meet these requirements, and then somebody will give you marks based on whether you've met those requirements, and that's it. I think this is one of the first times where we got to be more creative, because in addition to those requirements, we could kind of build the game as we wanted. We could choose, the characters, the shapes, the objects, the colors, whatever it was. And I think just seeing what other people were building, like our friends, and then taking inspiration from that, and kind of just being creative and not having that kind of pressure that we're doing this just to get grades, was a great experience. In addition to kind of building a full piece of, a full app or a full piece of software rather than just a small algorithm or a small program, something that, I could like show to my parents or show to my friend and say, this works.
As someone who designed that curriculum 10 years ago, I can tell you what I was thinking when I was interacting with you students. When I had learned coding, I'd always found that it's easier to learn coding when you're having fun. And it's a much better approach than the push-driven approach that schools often use. My schools in California, when I was in school, did have some basic computer science classes, but those were very theoretical in nature. And any book you pick up in the library is very theoretical in nature. And in those days, in 2010, 10 years ago, if you would search on the internet for a coding tutorial, it would be very theoretical. And so the goal that I had when starting Camp K12 was, in fact, to take what kids love and put that in a curriculum. And so the reason the very first course that Camp K12 launched, and you were part of it, the reason it was a game development course is because with game development, guys, you can actually learn math and coding and physics in a much better way than the existing curriculum of school. And I remember teaching to your classmates, Tanay, how to use trigonometry to make the enemy spaceships move in these kinds of waves. I remember teaching how to have shooting look realistic, because you need to implement the equations of, you need to understand how acceleration and velocity are related. You need to understand the effect of gravity over time on a body flying in space as it drops to the ground. If you want to make a character jump, you have to understand that. I remember we did a lot of graphics in your curriculum. We did a lot of drawing, and the way I like to introduce that at the time was, we started with a simple chessboard, then we started by building other graphics applications before we started animating them, before we made games. And through that, we learned, uh, we built this sense of coordinate geometry, like X and Y axes in that case, and how you can do vector mathematics and mathematics to understand how to move objects across the screen, how to understand positions. And it was a very math intensive course. And we did this largely because, as a consumer of coding, I had discovered the love for coding, and very much by grounding it in things I love to do. And I was very pleased that you and your classmates who go through, who were part of a very rigorous kind of school, like DPS Archipur is known for its rigorous curriculum and academic excellence, were able to pick it up and love it so much. And from the whole parent body of the school discovered that, there's some magic here. Parents didn't always understand what is game development. Parents often, when they look at their child doing game development, they say, what is this? Why are you doing game development? Why are you not building an app? Why are you not building a website? But kids who are here, as well as parents who are here today, look at Tanay today. Today, Tanay is at Google and building apps that change the world. But his journey started by building games. And so games are not a distraction. Games are a building block and a stepping stone to what comes after, which is apps and other things. And on that note, Tanay, I'd actually like to share with you a big concern that parents have during school days. And parents ask me all the time, and my teammates as well, hey, my child is so busy. In the school system that we have in India as well, for those of us joining from outside of India, every school system in the world, and I've taught in many school systems across different continents, is similar in that it has so many obligations or so many requirements. How did you find time to be academically successful and to get into Stephens, which has an insane cutoff rate, and still find time to pursue your hobbies and coding? And say this for the parents. The parents are asking, how do I balance my child's time? Because I'm concerned about their success in the college admissions process. How do I find time to encourage my child to code and do things that will help him or her down the road, right? In building their own companies and getting into companies like Google.
Yeah. So I think there are two aspects to that. The first is, I think it's important to recognize that coding is, increasingly just a very important part of the skills you develop in your education growing up, right? And we might talk about this a little later as well, but just like a lot of statistics and so on are, really important 20 or 30 years ago and are now. I think there's a step further, which is that coding should be seen kind of as a skill separate to all the other classes that you take, but part of that education that will come in handy no matter what job you do, what industry you do. Just having those skills are so important. Even now, I see executives who are 45 years old and running massive companies who didn't learn how to code earlier are spending time coding now and learning how to do it because they still think it's useful. I think the second thing is something that you actually mentioned, which is if kids are having fun when doing it, that also changes the calculus slightly, because then it's not about coding eating into study time, but it's about how does coding and kind of building things interact with the leisure time, where otherwise you would be playing games in that 1 hour break you have. You decide, I'm going to spend that time building a game instead and developing those skills at the same time. And so if it actually becomes a fun activity, then it fits into the day in a very different way than it would if it were an additional requirement that you have almost to get into college or to do things like that. So I think those are the two ways that I'd look at it. Firstly, it's a very important skill, but secondly, it's a skill you can develop without actually having to interfere with all your activities, as long as you're enjoying it in the way you enjoy your other leisure activities.
So guys, Tanay is an example of someone who was successful in the Indian system, right? Getting into Stephens, and we're going to talk about that next. But he also, as you can tell from his stories, was always doing projects. I think the phrase he used was building things and asking the question, how does something work, and breaking it apart. And if you look at other stories of people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, the stories of these successful people often start with that kind of process. Now, Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates both got admitted to Harvard University, so they had good grades, but they dropped out and they ended up doing their own things. And that they were able to do that because in school days, in addition to studying for exams, they were able to pursue their hobbies and become and build this muscle memory and reflex, which Tanay has also built because he started in fifth grade and hasn't stopped. If you look at that, he started in fifth grade and he has not stopped coding. Uh, and that's something we find even in other success stories when you look at role models. So there's something there, parents. And for parents who are watching this now or will watch it later, there's something there. It may not be apparent to you immediately how creating time apart from studies helps the child, but just look at the evidence. It's out there. That's what I would say to you. Let's jump into your life after school. And it's a very interesting journey. Even I would like to know how you ended up going to all those institutions. Let's first talk about Stephens. And you made this choice to go to DU and to Stephens. Many of the speakers we've had in the past months have actually made the choice to go through the IIT system or the technology, the engineering school system. And a few of them have made the choice to directly apply abroad. So talk about how you, first of all, how you thought about it, how your family thought about it, and why you chose the DU and Stephens kind of system rather than the engineering college kind of system, given that you loved technology so much.
Yeah. So I think in college, there's so many kind of different directions that everyone can take, and it's so hard to decide. There's kind of the engineering route where you study for IIT and the other engineering exams, and you really have to devote so much time to that. The second one is if you want to apply abroad, you take the SATs, and then you kind of build out that kind of profile. Or the third is you decide you want to go to kind of an arts and sciences school like Delhi University, and you really focus on your school grades and doing as well as possible and so on. But all those require very different things. And, in 11th and 12th, you only have so much time that you can devote, right? And you kind of have to pick. And that was a difficult decision for me. I think the other takeaway here is it's okay if you don't know at this point exactly what you want to do. But one thing I did realize was that having a very strong education in some fundamental or the other would be really useful. So at Stephens, I decided to look at something like maths or physics honors to get that, very fundamental, quantitative, scientific kind of education, knowing that, it didn't matter if I wanted to do physics later or not. I could leverage that either to go to grad school, say in the US or somewhere and do a master's in another discipline, or join any kind of company that I want to do, whether it's in consulting or technology or whatever it is. But the skills that you learn, the math and the logic and all that kind of thing would be important no matter what. So I decided to kind of let the others go and say, I'm really going to focus on my school exams, and on the side, obviously keep doing my coding and the other stuff I do for fun. And then once I joined Stephens, I said, okay, I can still, my board exams have gone, really well. And I think, I've taken the SAT already. So I think I have a chance now to maybe look at even going abroad to study kind of earlier than a master's. So I kind of made a deal that said, look, I'm going to Stephens, but with my parents, well, I'll apply to a few colleges in the US and I'll apply for a scholarship. And if I get in and I get a scholarship, then I can go. Otherwise, I know that I have this really strong foundation, with physics honors at Stephens. And so I spent a few weeks applying that December after my first semester exam at Stephens. And I got into a few schools I really liked. I got the scholarship, and then I decided to join Brown. And even at Brown, I majored in three things. I did applied math, economics, and computer science. And the reason I didn't want to do just computer science is because, again, kind of really wanted to get those fundamentals down as well. So in addition to kind of building stuff and coding with computer science, I want to be really, really strong at those math fundamentals that help you become a better coder and better engineer, kind of no matter what you do.
Sure. I'm hearing a lot of this messaging about how math and the sciences and computer science are actually related. And in your life, they've always been very intertwined. You, even in school days, were doing a lot of math and then computer science, but you chose to dig deeper into the hard sciences and the hard math at Stephens, and then triple majored, which is something I haven't actually heard of that much at Brown, across math, economics, and computer science, you said.
Yep.
Okay. Can you tell us a bit about how the US college system differs from the India college system. So you've experienced the best of both worlds. You've seen Stephens for some time. You've seen Brown, which is an Ivy League university and has brilliant students from across the globe. What are some differences that you can highlight for kids who are in high school and for parents who someday will think about that for their children?
Yeah. So I think there are a couple of differences. The first one is the rigor is very different in that at Stephens, Stephens was a bit like school in the sense that, there were these exams at the end of the year, the end of the semester that were really, really important and were the majority of your grade. And so you had to put in a few weeks a year where you really went for it, or a couple of months where you really, really went for it, and optimize your time in that way. In the US system, generally, your final exam will only be 25, 30% of your grade. Instead, every week you're evaluated. So it's very rigorous and relentless in that sense. And every week the material builds on the previous week, and you have another problem set and so on. So you can't really afford to switch off. So that level of rigor is very high on a week-to-week basis. I think the second difference is that you get a little more freedom in the sense that if you are assigned a project or you're assigned a paper to write, there's certain requirements in that you have to be able to prove certain things or demonstrate that you've learned that skill or learned that content. But you have much more freedom in the topics that you choose to do that with. So for example, when I was doing an economics class and I was doing research on different countries that were progressing in different ways, I actually wanted to bring my computer science and coding into it. So I used that to actually take a lot of data about economic activity in different countries and write a computer program to analyze all that data, come up with different predictions and so on, and did in a very different way to my classmates, and had a very different approach in that sense. But because the freedom is in terms of saying, look, research this topic and get these insights, you can actually approach it however you want, as long as you demonstrate you've learned the material. And I really like that freedom because it really encourages you to explore things that interest you, rather than just doing things for the sake of it. And coming back to that idea of if you enjoy things, you're much more likely to be good at them and keep doing them. I think that's something the US system has been very, very good at, especially in some really good universities. I think
Brown is known to be the most flexible. You talked about freedom. There's US universities and then there's Brown, which is known to be even more flexible than the other US universities. So you probably got to see the best on that spectrum.
Yeah, and you can kind of take classes in any department. Brown even lets you design your own major if you decide that none of the existing majors are exactly what you're looking to do and you want to combine majors or do something creative. As long as you can prove to them that you're going to meet that intellectual rigor and put in the effort, they're willing to be flexible for you. And that's great. And especially because so many of your classmates come from different disciplines and different backgrounds. It could be a combination of computer science and political science, or design and physics and so on. And having that flexibility really brings out different aspects of your interests.
Sure. Hey, some of the students are asking over the mobile app, what kinds of projects did you code during your college days?
Yeah, so there were quite a few interesting ones. So I did quite a bit of research in the computer science department. So one thing we did that was really cool was Microsoft Research were giving us these massive touchscreens, these 85-inch touchscreen displays that they were going to put up in museums and galleries and things like that. So we work with them to write software where these really, really big pieces of art could be analyzed in real time. When I say big, I mean, think of a painting the size of a football field. And obviously over the internet, kind of zooming in to every, brush stroke on the painting is really, really hard. So we use a lot of math to say, okay, how can we calculate it so that we can kind of predict what part of the painting you'll look at next and preload that and so on, so that you could just move your hands over the screen, over that 85-inch screen, and the painting would just come in real time. And these are paintings that are too big to be exhibited in one place and are very, very valuable and 400 years old and so on. And so I think the Nobel Committee actually used that technology for kind of one of their museum exhibits around the world during the Nobel Prize time. So that was an interesting one. Also did quite a bit around, one of my internships. I was working with this company that was getting this full stream of Twitter posts, of Instagram posts, of news articles, Facebook, all of that. And they said, what we want to do is find all the deals and discounts that are mentioned there, whether it's grocery stores or whether it's clothes or whatever it is. And so I work with them to use machine learning and natural language processing, which I know are a couple of the technologies that a lot of might learn in a few years at Camp K12.
You're already learning.
Already learning?
We have an AI module which starts in grade 3 and 4, which exposes them. And we built a platform for them called AI Playground. Some of the students who are here would know that, which lets them train their own text models and gives them NLP functionality bundled in. So some of them might actually know the words you're about to use.
Wow. Yeah. So we use a lot of different kind of models that analyze the text, figure out which posts were talking about deals and discounts, and then turn that into an application. So anyone could kind of search and say, I'm looking for jeans, and it'll show up a bunch of coupons with 20% off and so on. So I made an application that did that in real time. And when I say real time, I mean we were looking at billions of posts every single day, right? You know how much content is on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all of that. So the only way to do all that at scale was to use all these kind of statistical and machine learning and natural language approaches. So that was really, really fascinating. But I've also, I did all these things at school. But the thing to know in terms of building all the time is even now, the last few months, I've decided I kind of want to go back to coding and building things from scratch outside my job, because once the bug bites you, it doesn't go. So I'm sure a lot of football fans here who follow the English Premier League. So I actually built kind of a Dream 11 style, app or a game just for some of my friends to play, where everyone can predict scores, predict performances, get points. And every week, that app connects to the database of, global performances, gets the scores and give everyone the point kind of a thing. So every week with my friends and family and others, we check in to see the scores and all that kind of thing. So, and really I'm just doing this for fun because I like football, and the team I support, Arsenal, are not doing very well right now. So it gives me joy to win points in other ways. So no matter what you're interested in, there are always ways to kind of, build things and build technology and applications in those fields.
Hey, Tanay, I can't stress this enough for the parents and students that are here. Coding, you should not view it like a course that you take and then you get the certificate and then you are done. You should view it like a sport. You should view it like your favorite sport, right? Like football or tennis or swimming. And if you look at Tanay's story, he started coding in 5th grade. He told you how even now, a few months ago, he's coding. And notice the things that he does and he spends his time on, they're not always motivated by, oh, I need to do this for my job, or I need to do this for my college admission. In fact, most of the times they're not motivated by that. He has an idea and he solves the problem that he's thinking about, and he does it for fun. And that, I think, guys, is something I've heard across every speaker that we have invited for the last 5 months. It is something I know was true for all of my classmates at MIT. If you are the kind of person who solves problems for fun and builds things for fun, then the world is your oyster. And really doesn't matter which company you work at, which college you go to, you are going to do things in this life. And that is what we like to really emphasize on at Camp K12 as well, which is to build habits of creative creation. Not because you need to show that certificate to someone, not because you need to build that project and put it on your resume, but because in the process of building it, you build that realization and the confidence that you are not too young to solve problems, like Tanay has been doing since 5th grade. So Tanay, thank you. I think this is a really good testament to the value of this skill set. I would love to switch gears to the Google story. Most of the questions as I look through them on the mobile app are in fact about everything from how you got into Google to what problem you're solving at Google. One kid asked, how can I replace you at Google? There's so many questions here, and some. So why don't you start by talking about how you got into Google in the first place? I know that, guys, actually, before we answer that question, Tanay is a product manager at Google. And there are many roles that computer science and engineering, these skills open up for you in terms of opening up doors. Product manager is one we haven't talked about in the last 5 Camp K12 talks that we've done. We've met engineers. And so I would like Tanay to start by explaining what it means to be a product manager at Google and to differentiate that from engineering. And then we can talk to him about how he got into Google and those kinds of things.
Yeah. So So I think the way I think about it is software engineering is when you know you want to build something, how do you go ahead and decide how to build it? And how do you actually go ahead and build it? Right. So what are the technologies that you decide to use? Do you decide to use Java or Python? What kind of machine learning model do you use? How do you actually go ahead and code it? And then obviously the aspect of actually coding it, running it, testing, and so on. Product management is a bit different. Product management is about deciding what to build, what the product is, what features it has, why you're building it, how the user will interact with it, and so on. So I'll give you an example. So I'm sure a lot of people are seeing the ads for Reels by Instagram, right? Instagram and Facebook. So somewhere at Instagram, there have been a product manager who said, okay, let's look at trends around the world. We're seeing things like TikTok, where people are making short form videos, uploading it, adding music to it, making them funny, making them quirky, and so on. So we also want to build a product like that. But what is the product and how is it different to all the others? They'd have said, there should be many features. It should work really well on mobile. It shouldn't take up too much data. It should be fast. It should have a really good database of songs. It should have an easy way to edit, add filters. And then once you decide that, what is the design? Where do all the icons go? Where are all the menus? All the things that make it not just a good technology and a good piece of coding, but a great product that a billion people will use. And that is essentially what product management is about, which is you have all this coding know-how, you have the technology, but you're fighting for attention with so many other products that people have on their phones and their laptops. How do you turn that into something that people will actually use and find useful in their lives? And that's what the job comes down to. Now, on a day-to-day basis, this can really vary. Some days you have to pretend to be an engineer and really work with the engineers to decide what technology to use. And this is where that coding background is really useful. For example, an engineer might come and say, we've calculated that if we use this video technology, our video quality will be better, but it'll take a lot longer to download. If you use this other technology, the video quality will be slightly worse, but it'll be faster. So the engineers can, the engineering side of you can help calculate that, run the numbers, but it's the other aspect about knowing the customers, about understanding them, making decisions that can help you decide which of those technologies should actually go into your app. Another day, you might be a marketing person that'll say, what is the kind of TV ad that we should put out there? Who should it feature? What is the example it should have? Who are we targeting? A third day, you'll be working with the designers to say, which logo should we use? What should the color scheme be? All those kinds of things. So product management is really one where you have to work with all the different people that it takes to build a product and build a business rather than just, building a piece of technology or a piece of code. So that's the way that, I kind of, differentiate between the two. The downside, though, is that I, as you can tell, really, really like coding and love writing code every day and all that kind of thing. As a product management, you don't get to do enough of that. You don't spend as much time actually building the technology rather than really understanding the technology. So the trade-off is that you have to spend a lot more time in annoying meetings and things like that rather than learning how to code. So there are pros and cons of both. And I spend a lot of time deciding kind of, which path to go down and happy to speak more about how I made that decision. But product management is definitely a very new and interesting kind of role in software and technology companies.
So Tanay, the most popular question as I'm going through the mobile app questions here is how to get into Google. I think people are asking that in a generic way, and I'm sure you've heard that from lots of people in the past. So what is the advice you can offer about how to get into a company like Google, that too in the headquarters in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, so I think the first step is keep doing what you're doing right now, which is keep learning how to code, keep developing your skills, keep building things. Google is fundamentally a company that loves people who build things. So when you have all these projects that you're building right now, you keep developing on them, you build more and more complicated ones, and so on. That's a big qualification that you're definitely going to have. The second is really think about how you can not just build these projects, but see how they affect your thinking, right? That you should start thinking in a very logical and quantitative way about different problems. And that's what Google really looks for. When there's the interview process, Google is not just looking at how well, how precisely you can write the code. right? Because Google is all about, can you learn quickly? It's not about necessarily about what you already know. So in that interview, if you can demonstrate the ability to quickly pick up concepts or quickly apply concepts that you've learned, that is what makes you a very strong candidate in that interview process. And that's something you should definitely pay a lot of attention to, that, when you use, one of the Camp K12 tools to use AI and NLP to build a chatbot or to build a game, the point is not just the game. The point is that you've learned about AI and NLP. And now when Google in an interview asks you, how you'd build or how you design a self-driving car, for example, you can talk about how those technologies that are used in the chatbot can be repurposed conceptually for something like a self-driving car.
Hey, Tanay, I'm seeing some, thank you for that explanation. I'm seeing some questions that I would love to share with you from our audience directly. One I think you've already answered. So there's a child by the name of Mriganka. Mriganka, if you're here, congratulations, you're going to get a prize after this. You've asked a question. You've asked two great questions I want to share with Tanay. One is, do you have a mentor or role model that has been driving you, or otherwise, what is your inspiration? Like, why do you do the things that you do? What motivates you to be where you are? That's the first question. And I'm going to give you some time to answer that. And then there's a second question that the same child has asked. So go ahead.
Got it. So first off, thanks, Mriganka, for your question, and congratulations on your prize. More Camp K12 is awesome. So I think, people drive mentorship in different ways. I think one thing I've been really lucky at is having, gone right from school, doing all these classes, and then going to college and, these great places, and then working at a place like Google. As much as finding a mentor, it's your peers that can really, really drive you. And kind of do different interesting things that inspire you in different ways. And whether it's my friends at Google or the people I work with at Google, or the people that my friends at different companies, or even doing, different kind of jobs altogether, seeing how they're achieving things, doing impact, working on interesting things has definitely been a big motivation force for me. So I work at Google. One of my best friends runs a startup. A lot of them are engineers and so on. And we just kind of feed off each other. Now, on mentorship specifically, I think a lot of people who manage me at Google, my bosses and so on, have been very, very inspirational. And I think it's really important to know what you're looking for in a mentor. A mentor isn't just a person who can give you advice based on their life. A mentor is a person who really understands what you want to achieve in life and your aspirations and so on. So I think the most important thing when finding a mentor is this a person who is asking me questions about my life rather than just talking at me about their own life. And I know this is kind of hypocritical because I've just spent the last 45 odd minutes talking about myself. But when you find a mentor, make sure that you find someone who's really thinking about you and your circumstances. And conversely, make sure that you tell them about your circumstances and your aspirations, because everyone's a very different person, which is why not everyone is a good mentor for every mentee.
Tanay, I like that you described your peers as mentors as well. You described your classmates, your friends at Google, how they inspire you. I think it's the same for me as well. If I think about what it really comes down to, it's having enough people in your life that do things that make you say, wow, I can do it too. And my message to kids here would be that, mentors are not just older people who you have to look up to. They can be friends, they can be family, they can be anyone close to you. And there's a saying that you are the average of 5 people whose company you keep. And so build good peer groups for yourselves. And one way in which Camp K12 is trying to help with this is the next version that we launch of Camp K12, which you'll see in 2021. It's going to be very social. And you guys will build your own camp. So everyone at Camp K12 will have their own camp. And my camp is my set of peers that I add to my camp. And that's going to become a very core group for you on the Camp K12 platform, which is going to be a very social platform. So you'll be taking classes with this group. You will be able to compete with them, collaborate with them outside. You'll be able to interact with them and have two-way chat interactions. So we as a platform also want to enable mentorship and peer groups, because the number one source of inspiration in these days, it can get very lonely to be a student. I didn't go through the Indian exam system, but I went through the US exam system. I can tell you, when you're studying whether you're studying for Stephens or you're studying for the SATs or studying for the GRE, whatever you're studying for, it's a very lonely process. And having people who encourage you to pursue your hobbies and who remind you that you're never too busy to take some time out to solve a problem or write a line of code, like Tanay is doing now. He has a very busy job at Google, but now he's building this app on the side just for fun. Right? That is something that comes from having great mentors. So Mriganka, really great question. I personally loved your question. Thank you for asking it.
And just to add to that, some of my friends who I did the coding camp with at Camp K12, two of them in particular are still two of my best friends. I literally hang out with them in San Francisco because they're also there working at technology companies at Uber. So those relationships really last, and I get career advice from them, and I also just get dinner with them, play games with them, and so on. So, and it's so important to have that.
Sure. Hey, in the interest of time, I'm actually going to ask the number one question that parents have asked us in the past few discussions of this sort, which is just in general, what is your advice for parents of kids who are currently in high school, middle school, primary school? Let's ask that question. Let's switch over to giving some kids a chance to ask you and by raising their hand directly in the session. So advice for parents, Tanay. I don't know if you heard the question.
Yeah. So I think so. There are a couple of things here. I think the first is something we talked about earlier, which is coding is learning coding doesn't mean that you have to be a coder, in your career and so on. It just means that you have the tool set for pretty much any job, just like you learn fundamentals like mathematics and communication and all that kind of thing. So I think it's really, really important now more than ever to have some, to have those skills, regardless of the job that you do. And it becomes useful in many ways. I spent a few months as a consultant, and I actually realized in the first week that I could write a software script that automated my job for me. And in 1 week, I was basically done with my internship and asked for more projects. And my job wasn't to write code, right? My job was to analyze data and come with a recommendation and so on. But because I could code, I could approach the problem in a very different way and reach that conclusion. So really make sure that you find time to encourage your kids to code. And the second one is don't think of it as, don't just think of it as a requirement in the academic sense, but the best way to learn is for them to actually enjoy what they're doing, right? If it's building games, it's building games. If it's building applications, even if it's solving math problems just by writing small scripts, just challenge your kids to find ways in which they can bring coding into their lives rather than giving them coding problems to solve. And you'll be surprised the kind of things that they do and the kind of challenges that they take upon themselves to solve using coding.
Thanks for that, Tanay. I couldn't agree more. The role that parents play here is super important, and giving that opportunity to kids to challenge them with household problems or like company problems. Like one thing that I remember I used to encourage every parent to do 10 years ago when I started teaching at DPS Arvipuram, and you were in my first batch. I would do a showcase where I would invite parents at the end. And in that showcase, I would always ask the parents immediately after the showcase to go find a problem at home, in their company, etc., and give that to the child and say, hey, what can you do for me? Can you help me with what you just learned? And sometimes the child will build a mobile app. Sometimes the child will build a game just to explain the problem. Like whatever it is, doesn't matter. Real world applications of what they're learning is a great way in which you can help as a parent. And kids, if you can always do this for yourself as well, right? Ultimately you're the boss and you get to dictate your life outcomes, and your parents will help you, but ultimately you're going to chart your own life course here, and you can always find problems the way Tanay did. So great advice, guys. Let's take 2 audience questions. I would like to pick from the people who are raising their hand. Syed Ghaleb Mohiddin, I see you. Would love for you to ask your question. So please, I'll ask you to unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead. Yep.
I want to ask that how to manage our school studies and part time for coding.
Yeah. So what class are you in, Syed?
9th.
Class 9? Okay. And what subjects are you finding really difficult at school?
I think in here in India, the Telugu language, our second language, it's more difficult for me, and sometimes I face problems in social, that remembering dates are tricky one.
Same. I used to face that.
Yeah, remembering dates. Yeah, so I think so. For one, I'm sure hopefully you get some time every day, playing some games or things like that, right? Your leisure time. See if you can incorporate coding into that and into the rest of your studies. So one example could be you mentioned you have trouble with dates in your social sciences. So what if you could build a little app or a game that said, Syed, here are 20 questions, multiple choice.
Which
What is the date? And you give yourself points, right? And you keep doing that. You've learned some coding, and you'll get better at your social sciences as well. So see if you can find creative ways to combine coding with either your fun or your existing studies.
Okay, sir.
That's
Is that
personalized advice for you,
Thank
Syed.
you, sir.
Yeah. Let's go to our next question. Kids, raise your hand visually so I can see who has a question. If you have a question, just do this. Okay, let's see. On page 2, Adarsh has a question. Adarsh, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Yes, sir. Sir, actually, my question is I've been wondering about Google Maps, meaning how can it possibly take up every street in the world and mark our location inside such a big globe and make us move to our destination? Meaning, wouldn't it be hectic to mark like every ant that moves in the world and every building that is there in the world? So, how do you guys manage to do all that stuff?
Yeah, so I'll give the best answer I can, even though I don't work on Google Maps. So Google does it in many different ways, and this is again a good example of how do you take a complicated problem and apply technology to it. So one of them is they take cars and literally they put people in cars with cameras, and everyone drives around, and they make a really good application where whoever's driving around can input everything they see, whoever's in that car, and say, here we're seeing this street, here we're seeing that business, that locality, here there's a left turn. And they have thousands of people do that around the world. And it took many, many years, but they said this is one really good way of doing it.
Okay.
One of the other things they do is they made it, on the Google Maps app and other apps, they say you can add information yourself about your building. You can report corrections if the roads are wrong, if the gates are wrong. So, for example, my colony had some streets that were incorrect. So I reported that, and some of my friends have done that too. So they bring in all this information from the billion people that use Google Maps everywhere and quickly automate that using machine learning and so on to make sure they can review good edits to keep that information up to date as far as possible.
But sir, there is one more problem to this actually, because when you open Google Maps, the first thing it asks is, will you allow Google Maps to mark your location? But sir, how can possibly in that second itself, millions of people would be using Google for all kinds of stuff? Then how can you mark one mobile from that, one user from that million to billion of people, and then mark his location and make him move?
Yeah, so I think this is a good learning opportunity for you to read about something called the Global Positioning System, or GPS. I think it'd be a good exercise for you to, learn more about the technology and say, yeah, there are these satellites in the air that all these phones connect to, and each phone needs to connect to at least 3 satellites for Google to know that precise location to that level of granularity. And figure out what is the information that's sent to these satellites, what are the physics involved in making sure that they can kind of map to different phones. Once they have the signal, what is the math that they perform to actually compute all of this? It's a fascinating problem. So I highly encourage you to read about global positioning system technology, and I think you'll get quite a few of your answers and learn a lot. And maybe one day in the future, also build a Google Maps like app yourself.
Others, very intelligent question from you, and it's great that you're thinking about it. The most encouraging thing to hear in your question is you're actually thinking about how a large company manages such a large data set and such a high impact application. It's a great start, and I think Tanay's answer is spot on that. Go through this pursuit of trying to figure out the answer yourself. Use the internet. Ask people the way you are. Keep it up. Keep up the good work. Guys, before we thank our speaker today, I'd like to close with a few announcements on some special things, and then we'll come back and we'll close out and we'll thank Tanay. So we talked about Camp K12 at Google. Today you got to hear from someone who went to Google and then started his coding journey in school days, was a part of Camp K12's early days. Really, really privileged moment for us. Thank you, Tanay, for being able to join this and to share your wisdom with the team. Guys, a few announcements. There's a very special thing going on right now, and parents and kids who are here with us, I want you to be aware of it. Okay, this is the Camp K12 Winter Camp. The Winter Camp used to be an annual tradition of Camp K12 for every year for the last 10 years. We used to do it in school campuses like Tanay's former school. Now, in COVID time, the Winter Camp is online. And I want you all, kids and parents, to know that we have master classes. I'm teaching a coding class. We have another national debate champion teaching a debate class and a writing class. We have a chess master, international chess master teaching a chess class. And we have brought together a pool of phenomenal master teachers to run 1 hour workshops for you. And there's a calendar here if you look at it. So yesterday was the first day, guys. Oops. Let me turn on my laser pointer. Yesterday was the first day of this. And today is the second day. Let me just move my Zoom window so I can see my own screen better. Here it is. This is the calendar I'm talking about. Today, we have apparently 3 dance workshops. On Monday, we have chess. On Tuesday, I'm teaching coding. And again, on Sunday, I'm teaching coding. Just to give you a sneak peek, this was yesterday's workshop. We had hundreds of students learning debate with this debate champion and creative writing. We give fun homework assignments at the end of every workshop. And this is moving beyond coding. So coding is a very important skill, but there are also other skills that aren't always taught in the school syllabus. And as part of this year's winter camp, we've decided to expand. Now, I'm teaching a coding workshop on how to use math and physics. This is a signs of how coding and math and physics can actually go together really well. They don't have to be separate. I'm teaching a class, a master class on 3D coding and robotics, where we're going to build our own drone simulator, drone flight simulator. So you'll take a drone, you'll build an environment, and you'll code that drone to fly left, right, up and down, forward and backwards in all directions, which is a lot more fun than making a car move left and right on a road because it's in 3 dimensions. And trying to do it smoothly is a very fun challenge statement. For the younger kids, I'll be teaching how to build a submerging city where there's an ocean that rises above the buildings, and you get to control this robot and do parkour on the buildings and code this UFO and the drone to fly. So we have a coding class that I'm teaching for the younger kids, grade 3 to 5, as well as for the grade 6 to 8 students that are here. Now, this is the winter camp. Mriganka gets a free scholarship to this winter camp. Mriganka, if you're here, my teammate Lavi will reach out to her afterwards and let her know. For the rest of you, Lavi, can you share the link where they can sign up for the winter camp on the Zoom thread? Just so that I wanted them to know that it's going on and they can sign up. Great. Now, parents who are still with us and kids, if your parents are not watching this right now, do tell them about this. This is really important. Every single day, we publish a DIY project, a do-it-yourself project, and offer a free workshop every single day as part of our Facebook community. So tell your parents to go here, and Lavi, can you send this link as well? This is the parents' Facebook community. We talked about mentorship. We talked about peer group. And I told you Camp K12 is going to start enabling more communities and more mentorship and more peer interactivity. This is how we're doing it. Starting off with a Facebook group for parents and kids. There's something for you as well. There is a Discord group for you. This URL is really easy. For the kids, it's ck12.me/Discord. And this is a peer-to-peer question answer community for kids. For you, if you want to ask a question on AI, ask it here. One of your classmates is going to answer. You want to do daily quizzes, do it here. So for you kids, we're building this community on Discord. For parents, we're building it on Facebook. And it's called Camp K12 Online Community. And on it, every day we upload a new project. Every day we have parents uploading their kids doing these projects. And you can see one kid built this phenomenal art as part of one of our free art workshops. There's some dance things, a karate thing. There's a 3D game built on our 3D virtual reality coding platform. There's a kid doing beatboxing and beats. So this community is already a thriving community. I really encourage parents who are in this room to take this learning that happens in the Camp K12 classrooms outside of class and enable it to be a daily thing, not just in your classes, but to become habit formation. To join these communities, there's a lot of free projects and free workshops we're starting to do daily as we move into a peer-to-peer kind of platform. So going back here, guys, I'm going to just remind you there's a winter camp. My teammate Lavi will be sharing, our Camp K12 host account here will be sharing the sign-up link for the winter camp. And you will be able to join the parent community from that as well. Lavi will share the link for that and the kids Discord community. Let's close out by going back to where we started. And let's properly give Tanay a round of applause and a proper Camp K12 thank you for the wisdom that he shared. All the kids, please give a round of applause. Tanay, thank you so much. We hope that you enjoy your time in India, and good luck with that Dream 11 style application that you're building in your most recent coding project. You're on mute right now. Oops. Ravi, can you unmute him? I'm having trouble with my laser pointer. There we go.
Awesome. Thanks. Sorry, I can't even unmute myself. Thanks so much. Great meeting everyone. I see there are a couple of other football and Arsenal fans on the chat. Hopefully, after last night's result, we get some more points. But really, it is so great meeting all of you. Great questions. I think Anshul, you're clearly doing a great job with Camp K12, and I really hope all of you keep coding, regardless of what you do in the future. You keep building things. So much. And yeah, hopefully looking forward to speaking to all of you again sometime in the future.
Thanks, guys. All of you have a great weekend, and our team will be sharing links to these communities. And eventually we'll have a recording of this wisdom that Tanay shared as well, that you guys can watch and share with your parents. All right, guys, take care. Everyone have a good holiday season.